also for Black tech professionals and helping breaking down some of those barriers, making the right connections, and something that I honestly believe in, and that's the Black tech value chain, which is, Black folks spending dollars and hiring Black folks, right? And so when we need a developer, we hire Black developers, we hire managed services, and we work together. When we invest in Black tech entrepreneurs with Black dollars and other people's dollars as well. So I'm here to introduce Mary Chaney and talk to Mary Chaney, who is a colleague, a friend, a professional in this area that is someone that I really do respect, and I'm not just saying that to be nice. She is a person whose opinions I respect, and whose advice I follow in this area. So Mary, would you introduce yourself? Please talk about minorities in cybersecurity as well, which is your brainchild and something that you do also.
Oh, wow. He's scared of me because I'm former FBI. That's all it is. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you guys today. My name is Mary Chaney, and I am the owner and operator of the cybersecurity law firm of Texas, which is in another one of my brainchild. So I'll give you a little bit of my background and we'll run through it because I mentioned FBI, so I'm sure some folks piqued their curiosity on that. So I'm a tech geek by training. I have my undergraduate degree in information systems. And after undergrad, I actually went to law school. I went to Texas Southern University, Thurgood Marshall School of Law, HBCU proud. Yes, I am. And when I was at the law school, the FBI came recruiting because one of the ways you could get into the FBI was to have your JD, your Juris Doctorate degree, which you get when you graduate from law school. And so story goes, we're going to fast forward through a lot of this. Story goes, I took the bar because I did not feel like I could go 3 years in law school and put all that pain and not be a licensed attorney. So I became a licensed attorney, but I shelved it and I went into the FBI. The FBI put me on a cybercrime squad and promptly shipped me to Los Angeles. So I spent my time out in LA catching cyber criminals. Ultimately, I was on the cybercrime squad. I did a lot of different things. Life happens, and I ended up leaving service and moving back home. Home for me is Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. And so from there, I started my first venture as an entrepreneur. I had a consulting practice for which I ran for about 4 years, and was able to make it run for about 4 years until, as you know, when we are not financed a lot, we're doing it on our own dime. I ran out of money. And so I had to get a real job. So I went into corporate America. I started my career in corporate as an executive. I was director of incident response for GE Capital. Director, stood up and ran the security operations center for Johnson & Johnson. And I also had a short stint as a senior director with Comcast Corporation. And then, as we are prone to do at times, I got, corporate America became a place that was not necessarily a place I wanted to be. And so I promptly left. By that time, I was in the Pennsylvania area. I left and moved back to Texas. And, that law degree we talked about, I decided that I was going to utilize that. And I started my own law practice. In the midst of that, I also started a nonprofit called Minorities in Cybersecurity. It is my brainchild, my baby. It's my way of giving back to the Black community. We create leaders, right? There's a training, there's a level of education that we don't get. Not everybody is meant to be an entrepreneur. Some people actually have to go get a job. And so how you actually build your career and navigate those opportunities, as well as seek promotion to reach the highest level of whatever you want to be in this field. And so my baby's about a year and a half old, and we spent the year in COVID, and it's actually taken off
Yeah.
right now, and we've had some great publicity this month. So
Yeah. Great organization, great focus, mission, and traction for MIC. I encourage everyone to, if you're not a member or you don't know about it, visit the website, reach out to Mary, if you'd like, and please become a member. But you were talking about something, Mary, that is interesting. Your history, and this is a conversation that we have with a number of folks who are in security and privacy, and this will get us into the conversation. But so just the format really quickly. We're gonna Mary and I will talk about a number of things, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, probably about 20 till or 15 till the hour. So Mary, you have been in law enforcement. You have a JD. You passed the bar. You've been in cyber and privacy. You are a professional in this area. You are a business owner and have been a business owner and entrepreneur. Security and privacy professionals are one of the few professions that have to be well-rounded nowadays. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's one of the hardest professional fields to be in, especially from a leadership and management perspective. So why do you do it?
oh, I
Why
love
do
what
we
I do.
continue to do it?
I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
honestly and truly, Franklin, I get bored easy, and I'm never bored in this field. Right.
Uh-huh.
I mean, the privacy side to me is fascinating. So I've spent a lot of my career in operations, right? Cyber operations. And I've always been an attorney. I've always had the other side of my brain going for me. And just the privacy laws and, with GDPR, with CCPA, now CPRA, and all, and you have Virginia just passed a privacy legislation, and all of those touch on cybersecurity. There's this concept of a private right of action, and that's when an individual citizen can sue for a breach. Well, historically speaking, individuals like you and I who have their credit card stolen or their identity stolen, or based on a corporation having a breach, we can't sue because the court's going to kick us out and say, how can we prove damages? But now California has this rule by which CCPA, individual citizen can sue if they can prove that the company was negligent from a cybersecurity perspective. So you cannot divorce cybersecurity and privacy, because the laws themselves are being produced with security in mind. So, I mean, as an entrepreneur, just all the things that I've done in my career, it makes me uniquely situated, I think, to be able to provide value to organizations, just because I'm looking at it from a practical perspective, a cybersecurity and privacy perspective, knowing that, I'm not going to be screaming that the fire's burning everywhere, but there are things that you have to understand, especially about business related risk, that you need to understand in order to be able to protect yourself. And
So
no, you just can't. I'm sorry, I was going to say, no, you just can't buy cyber liability insurance and think it's going to be okay.
Right. So as security leaders and privacy leaders, we have to understand security, privacy, compliance, risk management, business objectives, tie all those things together, right? Business impact. We have to understand architecture, technology, and it's a multifaceted kind of discipline. But we've been doing a lot of things like, the traditional things that you know about and that we've done. Assessments, we start off with assessments and defining threats and threat profiles, vulnerabilities, protection, but a number of things, implementing different security technologies. What still works and what doesn't work as well?
What still works is the basics. I think that a lot of a lot of technology professionals, and now lawyers got, privacy tech, right? And, OneTrust is huge,
Yeah.
right? And but what people don't recognize and realize is that the only way that technology is going to work for you is if you understand the basics, right? The basics never lie. The risk assessment is still the best way for you to understand how you're going to tackle the risk, right? And no, if you just because you outsource everything and everything is in the cloud, that does not mean you can't do a risk. You don't need to do a risk assessment, because third parties are targets, as we saw with the SolarWinds issue. The supply chain is now being attacked. So how that's going to impact you up the chain, it matters. So understanding where you're going still at the end of the day is the best way to get things done. And then you can build off of there. I mean, I've been saying the same thing for 20 freaking years, 20 plus years. Basics, basics,
Yep.
basics. I mean, you can't just buy your way into a good security posture. You can't. What's not working is what we're paid to do. The technology doesn't work without the knowledge, right? And we keep building technology. Technology moves fast. I mean, if you think about the Internet of Things, you think about AI, you think about all these newer technology, you think about, the virtual reality glasses and all this other stuff that's technology is moving. Self-driving cars is moving. Security and privacy kind of lags behind, right? And
Yep.
so what has never worked is not thinking about security and privacy at the very point of inception, right?
Yeah.
And that is only going to get worse, because what's going to happen is these laws are going to come out and people are going to have to now go back, and it's painful. It's painful, which is why a lot of companies don't do it. Go back and start to bolt on different security and privacy controls that could detrimentally impact whatever the product or service may be.
Mm-hmm. And you know what, Mary, you were making me think that fundamentals, foundations, I mean, it's almost like, not to overuse sports analogies, but, look, if you're a basketball player, you got to have a crossover. You got to be able to dribble with your left hand. You got to be able, I mean, there's just things that you have to do. But from a practical perspective, a lot of times we're trying to add interesting technologies on top of unstable foundations, like our energy grid, right? I mean, just be like, okay, let's secure the energy grid. Let's, it's got to be strong. It's got to be resilient. And then, but let's put smart technology on top of it. Well, we're doing a lot of that. Let's put, security orchestration and automation on top of stuff that's not working. And we can't do that. We cannot do that and still have resilient systems. So what you're saying is it's so right. Let's get vulnerability management, configuration management. Let's get that right first before we start to put all this fancy stuff on top of it.
Well, and then you talk about the energy grid, and of course, I'm in Texas, and we just had our issue last month, right? and we talk about basics: business continuity, disaster recovery. The actual energy companies here in Texas had audits and had reports that told them they need to prepare for a winter storm. They need to prepare for a cold snap. They did nothing. They weren't punished for doing nothing. And then the most simplest thing in the world is snow and ice and cold. And it basically crippled our state for a couple of weeks. And so you're not doing the basics. And then it doesn't matter, what type of energy, whether it's, nuclear, whether, whether it's renewable, whatever that is, if the foundation, which is the weather changes and it takes everything down. I mean, what are we doing? The basics, right?
That's right. So how do you drive it? let's assume that there's company and practices, programs, functions, security and privacy function that has the basics. How do you, so let me preface this. A lot of times, you know this through your experience, we go into a corporation, we go into a company, we're a part of a company, and they see security and privacy as an additional cost, right? And so a lot of times we're told to do more with less, or how do you express value of your security and privacy program as either a differentiator or something? How do you do that and then drive efficiencies into the program as well within the company, right?
Well, you have to first individually do an assessment of where your company is, right? There are organizations that have a lot of risk, but maybe startup, maybe just transitioning out of startup mode, don't have the necessary resources. This is where the business knowledge helps, right? Because security and privacy is never a revenue generator unless you have a product and you're selling a security or privacy product. OneTrust has made that clear. However, within an organization, that's where the business knowledge comes in. Everything cannot be critical, period. End of discussion, end of story. You have to, as a practitioner, be able to assess where you can move faster and where there's going to be pain points. I'll give you an example. You have a company that outsources, pretty much everything. Let's say marketing is outsourced. Well, you have this module within, or when you're trying to deal with privacy aspects, you can deal with cookie compliance, you can deal with, data subject access requests. That's when somebody in California said, delete all my information, or somebody in the EU says, delete all my information. You have to be able to respond to those things. So you have to look at the organization and say, okay, if we outsource all of our website where we're collecting all of this information, would it make sense for me to try to build out a compliance program dealing with cookie compliance when I have no actual direct relationship with the vendor that's actually handling this aspect of the organization? Absolutely not. So I'm not going to beat my executives up with the stick talking about cookie compliance when I can just say, okay, was that in the contract, and put that on them. So you have to be able to assess exactly where you can bring most value, and then try to implement and drive those things to build the necessary trust for when you switch and say, okay, now we need this. They trust that you understand, A, it must be mission critical, and B, how to implement something with as least as pain point as possible. Everything can't be done at once. You have to select a place. And especially when you actually are first coming into the door, you have to prove yourself. You have to build that trust, because they're automatically looking at you with suspicion, because they think you're going to get in the way of the business doing business.
What you said kind of leads into a conversation. A dirty little secret that's in security is that, and privacy, is that we're oftentimes responsible or held responsible and accountable for things that we do not have direct management or command and control. And that happens a lot, right? So if we're talking about efficiencies and efficacy, effectiveness, we need to talk about our partners and how we deal with our partners who have broken business processes or inefficiencies or broken technology that we're trying to fit security in. And sometimes, as you know, it's hard to express to our partners that if you just fix this thing, if you make me a part of the procurement process, right? If you put this language in your contracts, or make sure that I have a security analyst, someone that's a part of that process to review contracts, whatever the remedy is, we can, we can reduce risk. We can avoid business impact later on that you're, so especially with supply chain security, right?
Mhm.
What is your experience, and what do you suggest? And this is all in driving efficiencies from a technical partner or business partner perspective, that security and privacy leaders can do in order to help their partners.
And it really comes down to, again, if you're in a corporate environment, right, as opposed to a service provider, if you are in a corporate environment, you have to build the necessary relationships within the organization to add value, right? Sometimes you just got to go in just to be a fly on the wall. And it's like, once they start to trust you to pull you into certain things is when you're able to say, hey, maybe we should do this. Because at least on the technology side, your IT partners, they have some sense of security. A lot of them do. And so just putting something in their ear just to add this or to add that, so you can actually try to prove that you're not trying to get in the way, because it's not my job to stop the business that pays my paycheck. That's just it's just not,
Right.
it's just, that's not smart.
Right.
That's not a good look, right? And
Right.
so how do you as a professional, as we said before, pick and choose those items that's going to bring more bang to the buck? That's it really is developing relationships. And this goes back to minorities in cybersecurity and that leadership aspect. There's things that you think in your mind that everybody wants this or everybody should be willing to do this, and if they don't trust you, you're not going to be able to add that subject matter expertise. But then it depends on where you are, where the company is. Was there a breach? Because after a breach, you can do whatever the heck you want to do, and you have all the money in the world to do that and to implement that. But if if a company is just keeping their head down, trying to say, hey, ain't nobody looking at me, so I'm not doing anything about this, that right there is a harder sell, so to speak, because they're like, well, I'm small, I'm this, and small businesses do this a lot. I'm small, nobody's thinking about me. And it becomes they're not thinking about you, but that doesn't mean you're not going to be impacted by something that somebody else does. Ransomware doesn't care if you're large or small. This whole idea of business email compromise, or somebody tricking your administrative assistant into sending out hundreds of thousands of dollars just because they think it's you. All of that stuff, exists whether you're big, small, or small. So.
And it has a greater impact the smaller
you are.
the company.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
When we're really talking about process and technology integration to improve, security, right? Making sure that we are some security and privacy, that those requirements and considerations are in process and in technology, but also relationship building from a small, medium-sized business perspective, making sure we choose the right partners, third parties, should say, that are doing things on our behalf. Because as an entrepreneur, business owner, or whatever, your day job's not security, probably, unless that's your job, and even then, you may not be doing certain things in security. But let's get into the technology. What are you seeing? So you've managed large SOCs and incident management and incident response. You've done that. What are the aspects? What are the components that you see are the key components to security operations, and also where do you see that going, and incorporating privacy? Because a lot of times we've separated the two, And as you've said, you know, we can't decouple them.
Right. And so I think, you know, just touching on some of the stuff that you were saying before in regards to what you need to do to build technology on some of these slicker technologies on your operational aspects. You hear about orchestration and all this other stuff.
Right.
And you hear about, you know, the speed of which a particular technology will be able to act on something. But, you know, as someone that's purchased tools, as someone who's tried to incorporate tools, as someone who's been on the ground trying to get this stuff to work, you know, it's garbage in, garbage out. It goes basic all the way back to, if you don't, foundational type of things. If okay, so back then it was secure, it was SIM technology, right? You were trying to have a security incident and event management tool. Well, that and I have a lot of experience trying to, you know, incorporate, whether it be, you know, and who knows if these things are still in existence, whether I know Splunk is still out there, but, you know, we had ArcSight, we had RSA, we had, you know, on and on and on and on, all of these SIM technologies. SIM technologies are, for those that you don't know, if you are in a security operations center, to get a whole view of exactly what's going on in your environment, you have alerts that come off of individual assets, whether they be a PC, a server, or whatever, that something's going on and it has to be investigated, right? So trying to incorporate that in an environment, and then when something does go wrong, and to investigate that, right? And so some of the most frustrating aspects of trying to incorporate a tool, especially a SIM technology, if you're limited by the amount of information that the assets are gathering. You can have intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems and firewalls and, you know, antivirus. And but if they're all not communicating with one another, or if you're not logging the activity, right? If somebody comes in and takes a file and goes out the door, and you see that they went out the door, but you can't, you know, put them pieces of crumbs back together to figure out how in the world they did what they did, then you're stuck. So I think, and so the basics of that is the premise of orchestration, right? So if you don't get this right, how can you automate something that you don't process wise understand? So you can't bolt on another technology to orchestrate how to respond if you don't have the information for which that technology is going to act on, right? And so it's, we keep trying to find this silver bullet to fix a problem when, like you said, we keep building on a broken foundation. So all of the slickness, the coolness, and everything like that can't be done. I mean, even for something like OneTrust, which I'm certified, I've been working with the tool, right? If it's OneTrust is an automation tool, it is ultimately designed to speed up your processes when handling privacy related issues. However, if you don't have an asset inventory, you're not going to be able to do anything.
You don't know
with
what you're supposed to either protect or understand. Yes. I was hoping you'd get to that because I was going to ask you about visibility, right? So people have, you know, we start talking about cloud providers, access brokers. Now we have got cloud access, you know, security brokers, those kind of things. But let's go back to this because I think this is sort of thematic. The basics: firewalls, IDS, antivirus, and I call them table stakes. But you know, EDR, endpoint detection and response, those capabilities are now table. You have to have those. But if you don't know the assets, let me SIM, right, that you mentioned. But if you don't understand the assets that belong to you, where they are, what business process they belong to, because then you need to understand the impact that it's going to have if it goes away, if it's compromised, et cetera. And this gets into response, right? If there's an asset that belongs to the retail and my business is retail, That's where I make my money.
Mhm.
And retail is that point of sale is compromised. That's a pretty high response, right?
Mhm.
I need to
Mhm.
take different action than it is than if it's, you know, someone else who is
Mhm.
back office, who's in a support area that doesn't have a lot of sensitive data or transaction authority.
Mhm.
So you just hit it for security and privacy.
Mhm.
Understanding assets
Mhm.
is important. Now
Mhm.
that's made more complex with
Mhm. Mhm.
cloud to prem.
Mhm.
You know, it's the complexity starts. So if I don't have the basics, the foundation right, if I don't get correlation and analysis of stuff in on-prem,
Mhm.
when I transfer it to the
To the
cloud,
cloud, it's not going to be there.
it may not be any better.
And so there are a couple points there. So
Mhm.
as far as assets, and the simple question is to any business out there, because every California citizen has a right to tell you to delete any information
Mhm.
that you have about them. They can put that request in. The
Right.
question is, what are you going to do? The question is, where is it? And if you don't have an asset inventory, if you don't have a clear understanding of where you're keeping their personal information, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud, you cannot, you can't, you can't tell that individual person that you've actually taken care of their request. I mean, that's EU, of course, but we're in the US, we're going to focus on that. And so you have to understand to comply with some of this stuff, because historically speaking, Franklin, I'm like I said, I was on the technology side, IT side. Application developers, app developers don't know what's being stored in the application. They're being
Right.
responsible for making live there, and they will tell you that I don't know. That's the business job to know that,
Mhm.
right? And so now you go to the app developer and you say, hey, you have this app, this cool mobile app. What type of information is it collecting? Oh, we have IP address, we got we got MAC address, we got location, GPS location data. We have all of this stuff, and it's like, okay, did you talk to privacy? Did you really talk to people about
Right.
exactly what you're doing? And then it becomes, okay, so this data is on this app. Where's that app being hosted?
Right.
Right? Is it, and then it becomes, where's that database? Well, eventually it sits somewhere.
Mhm.
Eventually. So
Mhm.
where? And so, supply chain security with data breaches and everything like that. It's like, so what if you don't know that? If you, as a practitioner in this field, an attorney in a privacy related role or
Yeah.
in a technology related role, if you don't understand the flow of that data and exactly which touch points it is on, to not only know when you need to pull it back, but to know how to secure it, you, you're not going to be able to say you're compliant with anything, because you actually have to understand. And like I said, I'm a geek, right? So I've been on the IT side, so I know what kind of information we can get, and it's like, no, they're not going to tell privacy that they have all of this personal information. Absolutely not.
That's right.
I asked the question, when we kicked off COVID last year, when they were developing all of these applications that would tell you if you were
Using
actually in a
location.
place.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell you if somebody next to you had COVID.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but you're not a healthcare company. You're not covered by HIPAA. They're not required,
Mhm.
because they're not a covered entity or a business associate. They're just using technology to do cool stuff. But
Mhm.
there's privacy implications to that. It's not, for the geek side, it's, oh, I'm doing it because it's cool, but not really understanding, well, what you're doing in the evil, the dark side of the information that you're gathering, right?
Right, right. So one of the things that's really interesting about what you said um, is, so I get a lot of startups, right? And the startups will say, well, frankly, I don't have a lot of data, right? And well, but you have a third party that you're using for this and that. And I like to use this example. it's when you start off in life as a 20-something-year-old, you don't have a lot of stuff, right? You don't have a lot of papers, you don't have a lot of furniture, but
Don't have a lot of jobs, don't have a lot of
you don't have you, but by the time you're my age, you start looking in your garage, right? And you start seeing stuff that you don't even know what it is, right? You start seeing, you look over here and in this box there's this, and then you like, well, where did that come from? And you're trying to, and so that's the way companies grow, honestly, with data and with other things, right? You start off saying, I'm just a startup. I'm developing this MVP. I'm developing all these other things. I'll worry about security and privacy later, or I take a cursory look at it and I'm not implementing the discipline or using the discipline around security and privacy. That you and I both know later on will make it a lot easier and probably develop a better product. And that's another dirty little secret too. We're talking about efficiencies and effectiveness. Is a lot of people don't know that good security principles build better products.
Right.
And delivering technology and delivering services. Putting the discipline in early on, and knowing where your data is, understanding data flow, transaction flows, understand, all of that discipline. You might call it security, you might call it data governance, you might call it good privacy practices, but it's actually just good architecture. It's good development practices.
Right.
It's not necessarily security. It will help security as you grow.
Right.
But and I see some companies trying to prepare for IPOs or trying to prepare for due diligence exercises. And what they don't realize is that they should have these principles in early on.
Right.
So,
No, you're absolutely right. And it can be a market differentiator, right? It can make your product better because consumers are only going to get more educated about exactly what you should be doing. So if you're thinking about it, especially if you are designing something that's going to collect personal information, or that's the whole purpose out of it, you need to think about that at the very beginning, because you saw, I mean, I could not understand why in the world DoorDash had their breach a few years ago. I mean, you made a product which is collecting people's names and addresses for which you're delivering food to, and you mean to tell me that you weren't doing anything from the very beginning about securing or understanding the privacy or the necessity for these things? I mean, Uber is another example. I mean, it's like that you are purposely marketing, your product is marketing to people. You have this information. Why in the world didn't you not think about it? Because this was before the pandemic that DoorDash had their breach. I mean, they've blew up since then because we've all been home, but you still knew about this because that's how you were designing your product. You're gathering GPS the most sensitive location data out there is physical location, people's homes. And so I always ask myself, to these startups, I understand what you're trying to say, but if you just make the 15, 20, 30, $50,000 investment on the front end, you're not cleaning up $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 on the back end.
Right. Into the millions even.
Yes,
but
of course.
What we're talking about are the principles of privacy by design, security first, or security by design as well. So before we get into questions, let me just summarize. We've talked about some great things. So getting into business processes and working with partners, business and technical partners, making sure that you talked about gaining confidence. We talked about doing the basics. So foundational principles before you start building on top of the fancy stuff that people are talking about, trying to orchestrate and automate things. We talked about understanding that assets, right?
Mhm.
It all drives these efficiencies
Yep.
that, assets matter, where assets are, understanding what you own, where it is, where it's flowing, and how it's protected. And then we talked about privacy and security by design. We probably talked about some other things that I forgot. But at this point, I'd really like to start, Elisa, if we can, start opening up for questions. We've got about 15 minutes left. If not, Mary and I can talk about this stuff all day.
Yes.
This is what we do and have a passion around. Any questions? Are you seeing any questions, Elisa?
I don't see any questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
So you all can continue for a little bit longer.
All right. So one of the things that, from a technical perspective, that I like to tell folks, and I harp on this too, is security and privacy discipline as not a differentiator, but as a value add. So for instance, I'm working with and trying to do business with a company, and in the RFP, they're not necessarily asking me about my security and privacy practice. They may ask some, but exercise or demonstrating to them that I have incident response, I have an understanding of incident response, right? I have a partner, I've chosen a partner that we ensure that we're watching our environment and our practices that you're going to be purchasing from me, right? Or we've developed a product where we have secure SDLC and privacy practices. What have you seen, or what do you see in that area of, differentiation, security and privacy for third parties?
Right. I mean, I think that for several things, right? So I'll start with your question in regards to having the conversation first with when at the RFP stage, right? And being able, especially if you're doing business with a healthcare organization, a banking organization, if that RFP is an RFP to an organization which you already know has personal information, whether that's the service that you're going to be providing or not, that is very, very important to spell it out at the very beginning and just say, hey, at least you have a understanding of what your responsibilities are in that capacity. So it's just nothing, like I said, but a value add. And then on the flip side of that, with a startup and you ultimately want to be purchased, right? You create this startup. In those due diligence aspects of things, they're going to start to act. Companies can't just buy companies all willy-nilly anymore. They actually have, because they understand they're buying risk. And cybersecurity and privacy are risk elements that could, you guys remember Yahoo, that can actually, make your stock tank or make your product worthless if you have poor practices in that regard. So if you're actually thinking about it from the very beginning, when you get to the stage that somebody's interested in purchasing you, or you're going through that due diligence phase, you can ask for a top dollar for your product, because you have thought about these things and built them in, as opposed to getting a lowball offer because you have nothing, right? And I don't think, from a business perspective, entrepreneurs or those that are in startup environments, they're thinking about it in that fashion.
Right.
A lot of let's call them inventors don't really understand. They don't really, they're inventors. They're not in it to create an operating company. They're in it to sell, right? And so whatever they build, they're trying to build it but if you want top dollar, understanding especially if you're collecting that data, understanding what your requirements are and being able to point out, hey, this is what we've done. We could collect this GPS location, but we turned that feature off, or we have a document retention of, 2 days. Right. And it's automatically purged. And those are the types of things that getting somebody that knows exactly what it is that's necessary, because like you said before, you're in the business of being an inventor, you're in the business of being in business, you're not a cybersecurity and privacy professional. But I find that a lot of small and mid-size outsource it to their cousin, their uncle. Oh, I got an IT guy, they say, oh, well, my third party has it. And then when I say, well, have you looked at the contract? What does the contract say in regards to those requirements? They're completely at a loss because they haven't had a once over, right? They haven't had someone as an expert to come in to say, okay, I get it. I know you're trying to do this on the cheap. However, your uncle cannot, your cousin Louis cannot, Pookie from down the street cannot do your IT effectively.
Right.
And you can't cut corners on stuff, especially if you're trying to build something, because the risk associated with the breach for a smaller company is much larger. You can go out of business for losing $100,000. If you are a $250,000 a year business, that hurts bad, and you may not be able to survive that breach.
Yeah. Some of the short answer is in gaining efficiencies. So because this managed security service provider game is somewhat commoditized. There's a lot of players in there. They're trying to differentiate themselves by the automation and other things, some of the tool sets they have. What would you suggest small, medium-sized business in the light of in the vein of gaining efficiencies, of choosing a provider? What should they be looking for? What are some of the considerations?
They need to shore up your weaknesses. So if you know that you don't back up your systems, they need to be able to provide you with the service that you're not providing for yourself, right? And so, when you're small and mid-sized companies, when you're choosing providers, and you can't make the assumption that they're doing it, right? You have to ask the necessary questions. Like I tell businesses all the time, oh, we're in the cloud, we don't have to worry about it. Did you buy the security features that go with AWS? Because if you didn't, they're not monitoring anything for you. So if you have a breach, I would hate for you to find out, but your data could be exposed, especially if you're in a multi-tenant environment. Right. And so, one of your neighbors could have had a breach that now, compromised the entire tenant, and you would never know because you don't have a security person looking at those. I mean, AWS is not doing that for you. And when I talk to small and mid-sized companies, they're like, they're not. No, they're not. You cannot outsource your requirements to protect your data, because if your customer is dealing with you, not AWS, they didn't go to AWS to provide this particular product or service. They went to you. So you're the one on the hook. You're the one on the line. And you can't, whatever that identity language that is existing in that contract, that's not going to protect you, because you're still responsible for securing that. So my advice is to get an expert. I know you don't want to hear it. Get an expert, that somebody that knows what they're talking about, to be able to tell you ultimately, okay, that's a little bit risky, that, I can do that, you can do that. That's a little bit risky, so don't do that, or whatever.
Yeah. And part of it, I think, is understanding what's important. What are the important aspects of your business? And the important, I mean, if you do everything through email, and it's just an example. emails, if you don't know how to secure your email, or something like that, and that's a simple example. But the point is, if that's the heart of your business, harden and secure your email. If you deliver, classes through some, AWS public cloud, you're just putting your videos up there, then you need to secure that. And then but the short answer is, what's important to your business? Ask yourself that question. Everything you put on the back of that napkin that's important to your business, understand how that's secured, and pick a provider, start interviewing providers. And understanding and get an expert to actually help you to choose the right provider, because the assumption is that you're planning to grow. And it's hard. It's hard to meet small and medium-sized business because you're resource strained, and choosing where to spend dollars, it may not be on security.
No, it won't. It won't. It's not. It never is. If for large companies, even.
Privacy.
4-minute mark.
You have to make that adjustment. Sorry, Elisa, go ahead.
It's about 4-minute mark.
Okay. Elisa, you had some announcements, I believe, that you like to do at the end. Mary, thank you. And Mary, I'm going to leave the last bit for you to speak to, and Elisa can speak to. So thank you, Mary, for your expertise and insights as well.
No, thank you. And thank you guys for having me. It doesn't have to be that hard. You just have to have somebody that knows what they're talking about. And if you find that it's giving you a headache, then it's probably time for you to get somebody else to come in and help you out. So
thank you.
All right. Well, awesome. Thank you both. So as usual, we will wrap up telling you all what we have next and what's coming up at the USBC. So let me roll through this for you all. So at the USBC, we do work with Google on a bunch of different projects, and one of them being this Black-owned attribute that you could actually add to your Google storefront, your digital storefront, and that helps businesses identify you, those who are looking to purchase with intention. We do actually have sessions on how to get this Black-owned attribute as well. You can go to grow.google/Black-owned. They will also, it's very simple, and we'll let you know how you can add this to your profile. As well, we do have our Black-owned registry. It's called Buy Black BY very specifically. So it's www.buyblack.us. And it's a very intuitive platform where we're not just listing your businesses and you're scrolling through a list, but you're able to intentionally search by industry, by product, by service. To the same point, businesses and organizations can look for you as well. We also do have onboarding webinars that teach you how to get your business on here. And then we will actually also have another section that will be intertwined with this where you can certify your business. So it will be in hopes in the short term here, just kind of an easy process for you all. We work with Chase on additional PPP loan webinars that we have, but as well, you can easily go to chase.com/PPP to learn more about paycheck protection plans. One of the many things that we do have are webinars that will stay on our site as well as stay on YouTube and our different channels. So you can easily go to usblackchambers.org/webinars and you'll see our on-demand resources that we have, which are always updated and additionally added to the website. So our upcoming webinars, we actually do have a Grow with Google session. Our next one's going to be in April, and actually all month of April, we will be sponsoring these Grow with Google sessions. So the 6th, the 13th, and the 20th, please come join us. And then April 1st, we do have our federal tax update webinar. So you will find, again, all of those on our website, our webinars page. So please sign up, and we look forward to seeing you all there. And that is it for us. Franklin, Mary, thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining.